Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another awesome interview here with Mr. Chris Greene, who is an awesome jazz musician. And we're here to talk about a bunch of cool stuff, new album, new music.
Mhm.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Good. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to Mr. Howlin' Wolf for always
Yes,
being so easy to work with and
absolutely.
a kind soul,
Yes, publicist extraordinaire.
for sure. Um, so your new album is the first jazz album on the record, right?
Yes.
On Pravda Records.
Yes. The very for 40 years of business, I've done just about every other genre of music except for jazz.
How
So
did you get that?
a very fortuitous and serendipitous series of circumstances. But the short version is that I actually recorded. I've done some Chicago, where I primarily play. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and everybody kind of has access to everybody. So I've been fortunate enough to play with a bunch of different people in a bunch of different genres. And so I basically have played with a bunch of people on the Pravda roster. I've done gigs with Steve Dawson. I've done gigs with Nora O'Connor. I've done gigs with uh, several people who are in the band, The Handcuffs. Um, I've been fortunate enough to do gigs with a lot of people. Um, and long story short, they basically were telling Ken that if you ever wanted to get into jazz or if you wanted to release a jazz album, this would be the guy you'd want to talk to. And so basically, he just kind of showed up at a gig that I was doing with Chloe Orwell and Brad Elvis of the Handcuffs, and basically gave me his card and said, "Hey, I'd love to work with you. I've heard about you for years. Would love to do something with you. If you need some help putting out a record, please let me know." And so he gave me his card, and so you get cards all the time from people who promise stuff or whatever. And so got his card, kind of took it home. I'm like, who's it? All right, let me check this. Who's this guy? Who's big shot or whatever. And so I get home, hop on the Pravda website, and it's just like a laundry list of several people that I've done gigs with over the past like 10, 15 years. And it was just kind of like, oh wow, like I've worked with this person, this person, this person, and it turns out they all were, like I said, they all were telling Ken Goodman, the owner of Pravda Records, about me.
Mhm.
And so we met up and hashed out the details over tacos a few weeks later, and yada yada yada. Here we are.
That's awesome. Yeah, I interviewed Steve Dawson a couple months back. He is so cool. Super
Yes,
nice
yeah,
guy.
fantastic musician, songwriter, all that stuff.
So that's really cool then about the Chicago scene being so interconnected. Have you ever like worked at the Loft?
I don't know if where's I don't know if I've heard that.
Wilco has like this space called the Loft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and their manager is Chris Greenberg, something Greenberg.
Oh,
Anyways,
wow.
they're super cool and they always allow like musicians to come in. Steve did a recording there, I think, and got
Okay.
Jeff Tweedy of Wilco
Oh,
to like get on the record, which is pretty crazy
no,
and very cool.
just Steve's been holding out on me. I need to talk to him. No, I didn't know about this, but yeah, no, it's super cool. No,
It's awesome.
I've never recorded there, but like I said, I'm sure there's several degrees of separation between me and Jeff Tweedy. So, you know,
So how do you describe your type of jazz compared to the mainstream jazz?
that's a you know that's a good question. I mean, because there's so many different people, or there's so much many different types of jazz out there. So, it's hard to say exactly these days what's mainstream, because and one, Kendrick Scott is mainstream, but then Robert Glasper is semi-mainstream, but then Mark Turner is mainstream, but then Whit Marsalis is mainstream. So it's kind of hard to say what's actually mainstream. I will say for myself though, I've been fortunate enough to play in a bunch of different circumstances, and I've also just, I am a jazz musician. I live, breathe, and study the tradition all the way, from Louis Armstrong to today. That's the majority of what I listen to and what I practice. However, I don't just listen to jazz, and I didn't really start getting serious about playing jazz until I was 16. Up until that time, and even after that time, a whole lot of 70s and 80s R&B, and 70s, 80s and 90s and 2000s hip hop. and any number of grunge bands from I went to college during the kind of the rise of the Seattle grunge band scene,
Uh-huh.
so that filtered into my brain. I was also in college during the rise of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row and Wu-Tang Clan and all that stuff. So it's just like all that stuff is, you know, rolling around in my head. And so, in addition to all the jazz that I listen to. So we just and I think I can safely speak for the guys in my band as well. Like we're all Generation Xers. So my bass player Frank or my bass player Mark Piani is the world's biggest Frank Zappa fan. My piano player, Davian Espinoza, we'll talk at length about how much actually he was when Eddie Van Halen passed away, he was he was distraught, like genuinely distraught. And because he was one of his early musical idols as well. It's just like we're pulling from we're jazz musicians, but we're pulling from a bunch of different sources, but we're not necessarily doing it just to like get over or compromise or be so accessible to a certain degree, but it's just we're pulling from a wide pool of music to kind of enhance our sound.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the pursuit of music, isn't it? I love that. I was lucky enough to interview Mudhoney's guitarist and
Mm-hmm.
Caius's drummer uh, a while back, along with some other '90s bands. And I think there definitely is like cross-pollination between genres of, that grunge can certainly trickle into jazz, and so can mainstream pop and rap, and I
Absolutely,
mean everything else. It just makes
absolutely.
a great combination.
Yeah, it's just music ultimately is a reflection of you as a person, as an artist, and so my thing is always like, again, I love the tradition, study it all day, but I love playing other stuff too, and I want, but my personal worldview is that it's all music, but I'm approaching it from an instrumental jazz standpoint. Let me see how I can use this other stuff to make my thing better, but I can also use the traditional stuff to make myself better as a musician. So
Mhm. Exactly. And in that like Chicago area, how is I know the jazz scene must be incredible, but could you describe it a little bit for me?
I'm just there's a lot going on. There's I mean it's certainly like it's definitely lot less fragmented than it used to be. I think that for a time there was, say throughout the '90s, there was nothing for you know the I was there was a lot more cross pollination. I think maybe towards the late '90s, 2000s, maybe kind of everybody kind of retreated into their own corners. The avant garde people went this way, the smooth jazz people went this way, the straight ahead people went that way, the funk jazz people went that way. So I think there's a lot more mixing things up and experimentation with styles and genres these days. So I think that's definitely a good sign.
Hmm. Exactly. How would you, as a musician, foster this experimentation within your own band, while making music?
Really, it's just that's a good question.
Thank you.
Really, it's just anything kind of goes with us. It's just like no feel or no style is off limits. So I mean, what's funny is like when I started the band, it's I mean to your point, like when I started the band, I initially started it because I wanted to just like get back to playing more straight ahead acoustic jazz. Like this is the point of the band. I'm going to start playing more acoustic band, and it started off that way. And it's like, okay, I need to start writing for the band, and I would start writing for the band, and it was like I start writing, and it'd be like something. Oh, that came out kind of funky. Oh well, all right. Well, all right. I'll bring that. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write a jazz song, and then I would try to. Oh, that came out kind of Afro-Cuban-y. Like, okay. All right. All right. This time I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write something funky. And I would sit down and a jazz tune comes up. So
Mhm.
there's just no kind of rhyme or reason for inspiration. And that goes the same way with the other guys in the band when they write and arrange. It's like I may write a song, but ultimately they got to play it with me. I'm not just up there playing the song with myself. So I may write a bass line, and Mark may have a better idea of how to approach it, or Damien may have a really like these are the chord. This is the chords that I wrote. These are the chord progression that I wrote. Damien may have a better way. of voicing these chords that I had in mind, or he may even have a better idea for a chord. And so I just like, all right, try it your way, and then we'll mix your thing with my thing, and then our drummer Steve Corley, who's just a master at like taking really complex ideas and making them groove. I'll just kind of tell him like, okay, this is the idea, or do your best impersonation of Max Roach meets Questlove or something. It's just like I can tell him, and he'll sit with it for about 30 seconds, and then he'll spit it right back at me, like infinitely better than I could have imagined. So that's just the plus. To answer your question, like I'm really blessed to work with these three guys. Like we're at this point we've been playing together for almost 20 years, so it's we're just we're musical soulmates at this point. So it's just kind of like we work together and we mesh together very well.
Awesome. And like that inspiration and these unique musicians kind of has to start early, foster early. How did you get into jazz as like a student or a youngin?
Well, that's kind of funny because like I've been playing saxophone since I was 10 years old. I just turned 51 this past year. So, um, it was always fun. It was always a hobby. Played in concert band, played in jazz band. It was always fun. I mean, I always enjoyed playing in jazz band. It was really fun and ballsy to get up and try to improvise in front of people, even though I had no idea what I was doing, but I definitely enjoyed doing it. But jazz in and of itself, like to sit down and ask, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old me to actually sit down and listen to a jazz record, it's like, why would I listen? That's old man's music. I mean, it's okay, but it's like, it's not Public Enemy. It's not A Tribe Called Quest. Why would I want to listen to that old man music? And then the short version is I took a theory class my junior year of high school, and that kind of like a light bulb went off in my head. And so all the music that I've been playing, like reading it on a page, like I suddenly began to see the science behind it. And then so that helped. And then my band director was always on me, like, you got such potential to play, but you don't really listen to jazz. And he was always trying to get me to listen to stuff. And I find like you should check out John Coltrane. I'm like, and interestingly enough, I had one Coltrane record at home. It's an old record called Ohm, which is it's Coltrane's one of his later more avant-garde stuff, which I've really grown to appreciate that part of his life, like that, like those, like a lot of the more spiritually minded,
Mhm.
Interstellar Space and Stellar Regions and Hulu Sumama. Those are all fantastic records, but Ohm is it's the worst record ever. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible record of an otherwise brilliant career. It's a horrible record, and so but so that's the only record of Coltrane's I had at home, and so uh, my band director's like, you need to check out Coltrane. I was like, I've already checked him out. He's kind of overrated, and he's like, no, 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 go to the library tonight and check out my favorite things. And so I went and grabbed it and completely blew me away. I'm like, okay, this guy is awesome, and it just kind of set me on the path. It's like Coltrane, huh? Who else does he play with? I played with Miles Davis for a number of years. Miles Davis, I've heard of him, and then went off in that direction. So it just, one by one, became fell more and more in love with it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went with me and just music in general, Like there's that spark, that gateway, and then it just goes deeper and deeper from there until you're finding like Captain Beefheart and just like
Exactly.
the craziest stuff ever, which is just so much fun to try to decipher and listen to.
Yep.
And I think I agree. I mean, like my teacher got me into Coltrane with and my seventh grade teacher got me into Beefheart, and like my orchestra teacher was big into jazz, and he really helped me
Yes.
like find that part of my improv.
There you
So it
go.
really is just the teachers are so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, exactly. Like if I hadn't had the encouragement of my theory teacher and my band directors and just kind of various other musicians that would put me on to different things, like, check this out, listen to this, what do you think of this? And I wouldn't be here talking to you if it wasn't for all that. So
Exactly. And how do you think we could foster this like musical learning in children nowadays? Even more, so we could have even more musicians and even more visionaries and artists.
well, I would say the really just play the music and let them make up their own minds. I mean, even my son, who like he definitely would not. He's 13 years old. He wouldn't call himself a jazz fan, but he's always around listening to music. Like I'll be driving around with him, and I've got my phone or got my uh, iPhone and connected to the Bluetooth in the car, and I've got it on random. And so every once in a while, we'll listen to something, and it'll hit him, and I can tell he really likes something. I'm like, and I've got like a little playlist of stuff that he likes. So
Uh,
so every once in a while, like so, a Parliament song will come on or something, and he'll like that, or Sonny Rollins or whatever will come on. It's just like, oh, so it's just like just exposing them to that, and because something's going to click. I mean, even you know kids, and even my wife, who would never had any reason to listen to jazz when I met her. Uh, you know, it's nothing for me to come home from a gig or come home from a rehearsal and she's making dinner or something and she's got, Ahmad Jamal on the turntable or like Thelonious Monk or something like that. I'm like, what are you doing listening to that? It's like, I like it. You've been playing it so long, I like it. I'm like, okay, hey, keep playing it. So I think it's just exposure. It's just like it's exposure and not being, people don't want to be lectured to. People do not want to be told that the music they listen to, the music they enjoy listening to, is crap, and this stuff is so much better that and you're wasting your time and your brain listening to this horrible pop, I mean, whatever. And I've done that. I've done that in my 20s. I was just like, you need to listen to stuff, and people were like, I don't want to listen to that, especially because you're telling me to. You're telling me to listen to, and your attitude is completely turning me off. So it's just like, all you can do is just play it for people, and eventually, if they'll come around. That's my thing.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you I think the best thing is when you hear people talk about these records over and over again to the point where you're like, what's the hype about it?
Right.
That's how I found about Swans, and that's how I found out about um Brian Eno and all
Yeah.
these weird avant-garde people. But
Right.
it really is incredible, like how far music can spread only from word of mouth. These relatively small artists that play clubs,
Yeah.
but are so
Exactly.
important to music as a whole
Yeah.
and to the rest of the industry.
Yeah,
It's pretty crazy.
and it really never stops because I've people friends of mine who know the stuff that I like will put me on the other stuff. Well, they'll
Mhm.
hey, if you like that, you should check this out. So I've discovered fantastic art. Like I've become a huge. I'm sure you've heard of Moonchild, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm completely utterly head over heels in love with that group. Like
yeah.
just anything that singer Amber, anything that she can do from she it's such a cliche to say like so and so could sing the alphabet, but she's one of
Yeah.
those people I would listen to her sing the Gettysburg Address. She's just amazing. But yeah, just I'm head over heels in love with them, and people put me on to that stuff. It just never stops. Like
Uh,
I'm keeping myself open to stuff, lots of stuff.
exactly. That's kind of the goal right there.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of, music, what kind of jazz releases have you think have been really impactful in your life other than the the Ohm?
All right. Well, Coltrane's my favorite things.
Yeah.
Obviously, kind of blue. Boy, Sonny Rollins is, Saxophone Colossus. What's it? Time Out, the Dave Brubeck album. Uh, Back to Miles Davis's Nefertiti is always great. The first Return to Forever album. Uh, Mahavishnu Orchestra's Intermounting Flame. Branford Marsalis's Royal Garden Blues. Like it just, it could go on and on from there. It's just like that's an open ended conversation. But those are like the ones that really just like
Huh.
just kind of knocked me on my ass and really set me here.
Yeah. Do you think that the scene was better back in like the older days? Because I know a lot of the records you just mentioned were pretty, old from either the 70s to the 90s area.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that jazz was held in higher regard then? Or do you think that it's a better scene in a better place right now?
Hmm. That's a good question.
Thank you.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, certainly you could argue that it was maybe say in the 40s and 50s or 30s, 40s, it was, jazz and pop were like kind of like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hand in glove. And then when, the beboppers came along and said, we want to be artists and you're going to sit down and listen to us and appreciate how awesome we are. That's when, it starts to become art and less about like dancing to it or whatever. Um, there probably was maybe a little more, I hate to say it, like, because I don't want to say there's not respect for it now. There certainly is, but maybe it's a little more respect is maybe a little more academic. Um, uh, but I don't know. It's funny. It's just like, that's a deep question because this. I mean, it's funny. Like there are people who they're fans of ours that will drag their friends to see us, and their friends are like adamantly like, I hate this stuff. I don't like it. Why are you taking me here? Because they've been told that you have to have a certain kind of intellect to like jazz, or you can't, if you don't know who such and such people are, then you can't truly appreciate what such and such people are doing these days. And it's just, so they're already kind of like at a standoffish thing. And so, but they'll be the first ones you sit them down, you just play the music authentically, and you interact with the audience and kind of like try to make sure that there's at least as crazy as you get. There's a groove or a melody or a bass line or a drum beat or something that they can latch onto and they can groove with, and then you can get away with some crazy stuff on top of it. They'll end up being the ones at the end of the day like buying all your stuff. So so it's hard to say like I mean you read all the anecdotes about how they were fervent people following the musicians back then. um but I don't know, maybe they, on the other hand, because of streaming and all the information we have today, I mean it's possible that today's listeners are a lot more informed, I guess, that
Mhm.
maybe more informed about the music and the I mean I have my issues with streaming, but one thing I will say is that like if certainly if you're playing an album and then if you like this album then you'll like that album, so it's recommending stuff based on what you listen to. So I mean I've had people say that they got to our thing because of something else they were listening to. So
Uh-huh.
you know
Yeah, streaming's a double-edged sword because for so much, for people like me and the high schoolers in this day and age with academics, it's just so much. And then with hobbies and sports and everything, it gets to a point where sometimes I can't go explore my local scene as much as I wish I could, you know? So
right.
getting Spotify telling me which bands that I've been listening to are in the area that I may enjoy or
Right.
like their local counterparts really helps. But in that same sense, I mean, it's very bad for the compensation for artists and for the artist rights.
Yep.
And like it really sucks because how much is compensation when it's exposure, that age
Yeah.
old question, is it worth it?
Yeah, that's definitely the double-edged sword about it. Like you're definitely not making any money streaming anything. But, somebody will, just at several points since the record's been out, it's like, hey man, I really listen, thank you for making the album. I really enjoyed it. And it's like, you know, I used to get really pissy about like, well, did you liked it, but did you buy it? Like used to get really pissy about it. Now it's funny, like if Ken, the head of my record label, is not getting pissy about, and he put our album out. If he's not getting pissy that you're streaming the album, why should I? You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
I'm not still not crazy about it, and there's a lot of kinks that need to be worked out. But I've come to terms with that part. And like you said, the upside is exposure. The upside is somebody across the world or across the country is listening to you and hopefully digging what you do. So that's the that's the trade off.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And when we were talking before that, about like live music and how it can really transform, I like I always take friends with me to shows because now, because of this, hobby has kind of become a job. I
Mhm.
don't get paid, but I get tickets and I
Yeah,
get like access to whatever local shows I want to go to. And
nice.
so whenever I take friends with me, like we saw a punk band like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and my friend was like, I actually really do not like punk, so I don't know
Mhm.
how I'm gonna enjoy this. And then once you're there and you're in the pit and the artist is like yelling at you right in front of your face, and they're dancing around and everything, it really is a complete experience that can really transform. And at the end of the show, he was like, I really love that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
live
that
music is just so transformative and incredible.
absolutely. Actually, my brother-in-law took me, my sister's husband took me to um he's really into just like not grunge, but like death metal stuff. And so he took me. There was a mini festival at this club here in town. I think it was called the Empty Bottle. And
uh,
I don't think I've been to several rock shows in my life. Never in my life been to a death metal show. And I went because I was like, okay, Roger, just so you know, I love you, so I love you and I love hanging out with you, so I'm going for you. And I kind of went. I'm just kind of like kind of keeping my head on the swivel. But I had the best time just because it was the kind of music that I had never really listened to, and just seeing the connection that these bands had with with the audience, and just how they would get into it, and how they were just really like, just the energy in the room was just, was just
yeah,
everybody,
on fire.
it was just, and I really enjoyed it. Just really enjoyed being there and seeing that.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things with mainstream, music is that these metal bands will get such bad raps. I think probably worse than jazz, because jazz, if you're listening to jazz, your friends can tell you you're like an old fart. But if you're listening to metal,
There's
they
a
tend to get aggressive and
connotation.
saying,
Right.
exactly, oh, that's satanic. Oh, are
Yep.
you antichrist? I mean, it's this whole other thing because the
Right.
media has completely villainized it, which is so terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
these like black metal and death metal, you'd assume it is so terrible, but I love looking up like acoustic death metal, acoustic
No.
black metal, and you hear these melodies are so ingenious,
Yeah.
and the way they're playing is incredible,
Yeah.
and I
And
mean, extremely listenable.
absolutely. And you certainly, you have to, at the very least, like, whether you like the music or not, there's a high level of musicianship that a lot of those
Exactly,
those those metal dudes have. Like, you like to play the drums that fast and that intricate, or play some of those bass lines, or just to those transitions, and and they're playing the same part. There's a lot of unison parts and all that stuff.
exactly,
And hell, you know what? You might not like the way some of the singers sing, but you try to scream like that for an hour long set,
it's
and see how
hard.
and see how your voice holds out. You're like, I couldn't do it. I certainly
Exactly.
couldn't do it. So
And there's a lot of connection between jazz and metal. I mean, like, I had the very lucky chance to interview Braun Daler, who is the drummer for Mastodon, and I'm in Atlanta, so Mastodon's a very local band.
okay,
And I went to his house to, go interview him, and he is so in tune with jazz drumming and like Genesis with Phil Collins
sure,
being a drummer.
yeah,
And it is really crazy that when you're doing these intricate fills and playing the fastest, yelly, crazy
mhm,
stuff, you still have the theory, the base knowledge of
absolutely,
these crazy drummers from back in the day that really influenced you. So it's
yeah.
all
I mean,
connected in one way or
yeah,
another.
exactly. And you're taking stuff from somewhere and adding it to what you do. Again, like, I didn't grow up in the 30s or 40s. I'm somewhat removed from like the source of the music, but I can study that, and then I've got no choice but to like be myself and add this other stuff that I've grown up listening to. And then
Mhm.
it's gonna, if I'm gonna be true, it's gonna come out the way it's gonna come out.
Exactly. And that's the name of the game, be true to
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that as an artist, you are doing exactly what you want to do rather than, I mean, the label doesn't seem like it'd be very pressuring, but what your label is forcing you to do, or maybe what other musicians around you are trying to do. How do you stay true to your intentions?
As far as the late, I'm very, very, very fortunate to work with Pravda. To answer the second part of your question, like, I'm very fortunate. At no point did they ever like, you know, I need you to sound like I need this to sound like 1959, or I need this to sound like this, or I need to sound like that. I mean, I've had offers previous offers for record labels before, and it was just either like, we love what you do, now do that, do something else. We love what you do, but we need you to sound more straight ahead, or we love what you do, but we need you to shoot for the more clear channel, smooth jazz stuff. And it's like, it was never that with Pravda. It's just, let's make a good record, make a good record that you believe in, and we will figure out how to help you broaden your audience. And that's the only really discussion we've ever had. But really, like, I'm always looking, as far as the first part of your question, I'm always looking for influences. I'm always looking to be influenced by something.
Mhm.
If somebody's doing something really cool, I want to listen to it, know about it, be it jazz, be it Brazilian, be it hip hop, be it, death metal, whatever. I want to be influenced as much as possible. So, um, but not in the sense of like, I'm trying to necessarily do what they do. They're like, or not necessarily what I'm trying to do, what like somebody else in my genre is doing. If there's somebody doing something over here that I greatly admire and I respect them as a musician, but I'm not necessarily, if I see them becoming, successful doing what they're doing, I'm not necessarily going to change what I'm doing
Yeah.
to kind of follow that. I think that's a fool's errand. I mean, certainly there are things you can learn from other people, like, oh, they're approaching the song this way, or they're making their records this way. Maybe there's some things you can do to, like, you can learn from and use, but I'm not necessarily going to like try to do a carbon copy of somebody, like, if just because you're doing something and it's being very successful. Uh, because there's room for everybody as far as I'm concerned. There's room, you know, like people will try to play, you know, uh, Sonny Rollins and Coltrane against each other in the press, but they were hanging out, practicing and sharing ideas and talking about music and life and everything. So it's just like, they're sitting there somewhere laughing, practicing with each other and talking about philosophy and life and music, and we're over here like, you know one's better and this is better and blah blah blah. It's just, so anyway. So yeah, I think it's just it gets easier for me as I get older to remain on my path and true to myself and whatever. Just because I'm a student, so I want to know what everybody's doing, but at the same time, I'm going to take what I need from the world at large and use it to make myself better.
Exactly. And in the music industry, there's just like the people that stick to what they do
Mhm.
and the people that do something unique. And oftentimes both sides will get super popular. I mean, the ones that are non-unique may get, with industry plants, it's terrible whenever you find out that bands like The Strokes and Clairo are just placed there
Mm.
by a Vans executive. I mean, that sucks to hear, but
Right,
it's those sides that people get rich and famous. But also, there's a completely other side of these small bands that go from playing clubs to theaters,
right,
which I
right.
mean, in my mind, is success.
Sure.
Like Swans playing bars to then selling out theaters is success. And bands like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard
Right.
selling out theaters to now selling out amphitheaters.
That's great. Yeah,
Success.
exactly.
So it's all to scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And even like, like with what we do, it's just like the audiences have been, we've gone from playing like, we went from like playing smaller cafes or whatever to like playing, rooms that hold a few hundred people. And so and it's just, and they're it's been a lot, certainly getting a lot more consistent. And we're starting to see people that we know, but we're seeing a lot more people that we don't know. And it's kind of like,
Exactly.
oh wow, that's kind of interesting. So it's kind of cool.
That's the best part. And it's just the same with what I do. I've been lucky enough in Georgia. We have a program called All State, where the
Mhm.
best orchestra players in the state get to perform in this like state renowned theater in Athens. And I've been lucky enough to do that a couple times. And that is so fun getting to play real theaters with like thousands of people in it, but also, with interviewing. I mean, on Instagram, I get to see who follows me. And Thundercat,
Yes. Oh yeah. Big fan of
yeah,
him.
his manager
Yeah.
started following me, the label executive for Brain Feeder Records, which is just like crazy,
Right.
that
Right.
he knows who
That's
I am. And
Hey,
then
that's really cool.
like publicists that I've worked with and people kind of finding me.
Hmm.
It's crazy. And you go from like 100 followers to 200 followers to 300 followers to
Right.
400. And it's the same with the followers on this interviewing thing. It
Hmm.
really is. It's crazy to get to see the progress, and as slow as it may be. I mean, like one follower a week is still progress.
That's still a lot of progress. Absolutely, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100. And even just just you know, it's even like knock on wood. It's like I've got the again. I don't know. I don't. It's not. It definitely doesn't consume my day to worry about how many streams I'm getting or whatever,
Yeah.
or what that kind of thing. However, I will I will say that I will take every once in a while. I will take a look at the artist app just to see, just to gauge how things are going. And I will say it is very encouraging that every time I click on the artist app, it's just to see what I'm not necessarily looking at how many streams I'm getting. However, I will say that there's a thing that's saying how many people are currently listening to the album right now. And at
Uh-huh.
least the last few times I've clicked on there, someone's always listening. So I'm like, okay, that measurement right there makes me happy that people are listening.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same way with interviews. Like views don't really mean much, but it does show that the algorithm is favoring what I'm doing or not. But
Yep.
then certainly like the follower number and the comments, people that
Hmm.
write stuff is also encouraging and helps whenever I'm working really hard to get like a big interview. Like, I was talking about King Gizzard. They have a sold out show at the Fox Theater in a week, and
Hmm.
I'll be interviewing them there. And that took quite literally ever since I started interviewing in January. It's taken from then to now, like an
To get
email.
to the
I have an email chain from January to now, and we finally did it. So it
good.
really, all that hard work comes to fruit
Yep.
whenever I see those comments, I see people writing, and I see people liking. It always, it's so inspiring.
Absolutely.
But
100%.
now we're at the end of our interview because Zoom, I don't make money from these, and
Right.
Zoom premium needs like $4 or $5 a month or something,
Yeah.
which I'm not paying that
No,
simply. Like,
they're right. I'm with you.
but it has been an absolute honor to be speaking to you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
this. I hope one day I'll get to see your show in Chicago, or I think you're gonna have to come down to Atlanta.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, let me know the spots I should hit down there.
yeah,
For sure.
sooner or later. But you have a great day, and hope to see you soon.
Sound good. Thank you. Now, great to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, great to meet you too.